After sparring with Meloni, is Trump now triggering an entirely new dispute within the NATO alliance? Rome has pushed back against claims by NATO's chief that US forces used Italian bases during the Iran conflict. Totally misleading, confusing, Italy is seething after remarks made by the head of the military alliance. Italy is rejecting any role in the Iran war as tensions between Trump and Meloni continue to simmer. Is Giorgia Meloni putting even more distance between herself and Trump following their recent disagreements? A major rift has erupted within NATO just as tensions between Italy and the United States appear to be easing. Italy has sharply criticized NATO chief Mark Rutte for suggesting Rome played a role in Trump's military campaign against Iran. Rome was responding to comments made by Rutte on Fox News, where he claimed that nearly 500 U.S. aircraft took off from American bases located in Italy. Rutte further alleged that the flights were conducted in support of what he described as Operation Epic Fury. Italian Defense Minister Guido Crosetto insisted that Rome rejected any requests to use its bases for combat missions. The Ministry of Defense said, and I quote, "In order to avoid unnecessary and specious controversies, the defense reiterates without fear of contradiction that Italy, and the Ministry of Defense, has always operated in full respect of the Constitution, international treaties, parliamentary guidelines, and the agreements that regulate the presence and use of Allied bases on national territory, without authorizing or allowing activities outside of the provisions in force." As already clarified during the briefing to Parliament by the Minister of Defense Guido Crosetto, the government has done exactly what was declared to the chambers. Only activities of a technical and logistical nature, non-kinetic, have been authorized within the framework of the procedures provided for by the existing agreements. Whenever a request arose that fell outside this scope, as is well known, Italy did not grant authorization. End quote. The Italian defense minister further accused the NATO chief of presenting what he called a totally misleading version of events. The Ministry of Defense said, and I quote, "For this reason, it is surprising that the NATO Secretary General, who has nothing to do with Operation Epic Fury, provides a reconstruction that conveys a totally misleading message by confusing the type of authorized flights. A simple check at the source would have sufficed to obtain the true representation of what happened, and happens every day. Italy authorizes exclusively the flights provided for by the treaties and that totally exclude kinetic activities, as it has always done and as it will continue to do under the current agreements." End quote. The unusually strong rebuttal comes just days after U.S. President Donald Trump accused Italy of offering little support during the Iran conflict. Trump made those remarks on June 20th, following the G7 summit in France, triggering a fresh spat with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni asked, over and over, for a picture with me during the G7 meeting in France. She is doing poorly in Italy with her level of popularity, possibly because she turned down the United States of America, a country that truly loves and protects Italy, when it came to denying Iran from obtaining or developing a nuclear weapon, but so did NATO for that matter. She wouldn't even let us use Italy's landing strips or runways, a great logistical inconvenience, and this despite the fact the US contributes hundreds of billions of dollars a year to protect Italy and other so-called NATO allies. Now, after the United States defeated Iran militarily, she wants to be friends again in order to get her numbers up. No thanks. Unquote. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni published a sharp retort to Trump's latest claims, adding fuel to the diplomatic firestorm between USA and Italy. Giorgia Meloni said, and I quote, "President Trump, these constant, unprovoked attacks are senseless. As for my popularity, being your friend certainly has not helped it, nor does it depend on my relationship with you. My popularity depends on my ability to defend Italy's national interest, and that is exactly what I have always done. That is also what I did regarding the American military bases in Italy. Their use is governed by agreements that we have always respected, and that cannot be violated as long as I am Prime Minister. Italy remains a sovereign nation. In any case, my popularity is none of your concern. I suggest you focus on yours." End quote. Meloni claps back at Trump over his begging for picture remark, turning a personal jab into a full-blown diplomatic spat. "Neither I, nor Italy, ever beg," Meloni says, slamming Trump's story as a totally invented and disrespectful claim. A rift deepens between the one-time close allies, as Trump's bizarre comments drive a new wedge into US-Italy relations. Italy's foreign minister cancels a planned visit to the United States in direct response to the escalating war of words. The Italian minister says Trump's offensive words do not just insult Meloni, but offend the dignity of all of Italy. The uproar erupted after the American president's controversial public remarks about the Italian prime minister. Trump said, quote, "She's probably happy I talked to her. I didn't have to talk to her. She begged me to take a picture with her. She wanted a picture with me so badly. I wouldn't have taken it, but I felt sorry for her." Unquote.
Well, some things deserve an immediate response. Donald Trump's statements are completely made up. I am frankly astonished. I don't know why the President of the United States behaves like this towards his allies. It is not the first time, moreover. I can only say it is disappointing that he does not show the same determination with the enemies of the West and of the United States, whose leaders he instead treats with far greater indulgence. There is one thing he should remember. Neither I nor Italy ever beg.
On June 23, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni sought to downplay the growing dispute with President Trump. Meloni insisted there was no intention on Rome's part to continue fueling tensions or prolonging the confrontation with Washington.
I'll start right away with what I'd call the main issue, namely Donald Trump and his latest remarks. Some argued that he was annoyed by the wagging finger, while others said that maybe he wanted to distract attention a bit from the issues of Iran and the negotiations. What's your take on this?
Well, look, I am not able to give an answer to this question. To be honest, in the sense that I was sincerely struck. And when I said I was struck, I was extremely sincere. I have read the various reconstructions that have been made, indeed, with alleged videos that supposedly went viral, in which my attitude might have seemed a bit assertive regardless of the fingers or not, as well as the reconstructions that would also tell of an attempt to divert attention, let's say, from the progress of the negotiations with Iran. So, basically to bring attention back to the difficulties within NATO, so much so that in the last few hours, as you have seen, the front has widened a bit. It's not just Italian but also involves other countries. I don't know, I can't say if these reconstructions might be true. And I have already said, and I reiterate, that I do not intend to continue fueling this confrontation, let's say. I think that our bilateral work with the United States must return to normal, as well as what I said yesterday in the Council of Ministers regarding the upcoming appointments. Clearly, I believe that Minister Tajani did well in the immediate term to cancel his mission to Washington to send a signal. But once the message gets across, there is no need, let's say, to go any further, starting right with the reception at Villa Taverna. Well, the traditional initiative that takes place every year on the occasion of the 4th of July, which the government will attend, also out of respect for Ambassador Titta, a figure who works very hard indeed to keep relations between Italy and the United States strong, but in general because I do not change my mind. Okay, I do not change my mind. I am reading many reconstructions about what Italian foreign policy will be now. It will be what it has been for the last 80 years. That is, I do not change my mind about how important it is to keep the relationship between the United States and Europe strong, which is clearly what an extraordinary part of our strength is founded on.
But do you think there could be some repercussions? I saw that some were imagining a tightening of tariff policy or trade-level repercussions for Italy.
I hope not, I don't think so. Frankly, I don't see any backlash. It seems to me that our activities and our relations are indeed going well. Even in recent weeks and months, both at the institutional and economic levels. Just as we must remember that Italian exports have grown recently despite American tariffs, proving that our products are very well received by American consumers. Therefore, frankly, I don't see any risk of a backlash. After all, these are two systems with a history of cooperation so long-standing and solid that this isn't something that gets erased or renegotiated over social media discussion. These are relations that do not start or end based on who happens to be governing the United States, Italy, or any other European country at the time. We need to bring foreign policy back to the depth it deserves, because sometimes we really talk about foreign policy as if it were, I don't know, Temptation Island. I say that to refer to the memes I see going around, But foreign policy is a more complex matter than that.
Will the Iran deal hold? Are you optimistic?
Look, it is certainly a very complex agreement. I remain optimistic. I think that above all, we must look at three elements that are fundamental in the agreement. The first is the fate of the so-called Iranian nuclear program. That is, we objectively cannot allow the regime of the Ayatollahs to acquire nuclear weapons, nuclear warheads, at a time when it also has amply demonstrated it has long-range missiles. I say not the United States or whoever is closer to the border with Iran, not Israel. We cannot allow it. We cannot afford it, and therefore, on this point, the terms of the agreement clearly need to be clear. There is an issue whereby if we clearly want to build a solid security architecture, no country in the region can or must feel threatened. This applies to Israel obviously, but it also applies to the Gulf countries, which have been, as you have seen, a target of this conflict. Although they were not, let us say, directly part of it, were not directly involved. There is the issue of freedom of navigation, and look, this is a very major issue. It is a very major issue not only because we have seen what happened with the closure of the Strait of Hormuz that impacted the global economy and consequently the European economy and the Italian economy, and therefore obviously we must guarantee the full restoration of freedom of navigation. Not only for what Hormuz represents in itself in terms of a fundamental hub of global trade, but for the precedent that control over the Strait of Hormuz entails. It is evident that if we were to allow, for example, the payment of a toll envisioned by the Iranians on the Strait of Hormuz, we would find ourselves catapulted into a world in which every fundamental trade choke point becomes an instrument of pressure against states, can be used as a weapon. This is something that cannot be imagined, and it is the reason why we have also given our availability, clearly in a scenario of peace, for a mission to guarantee freedom of navigation at the international level, for which, in that case, authorization from Parliament would clearly be needed, but I think Italy should do its part for this. These are the three fundamental issues in the negotiation. I am fairly optimistic, even though I know that the negotiation, we can see it even in these hours exactly, it is not very simple. I think ours must not be static optimism, so to speak. I think that, as far as we can, we must lend a hand, both on the diplomatic level and by offering our availability. This is the case I am making to you on the Strait of Hormuz, on a possible mission on freedom of navigation. I can make the same reasoning for what concerns Lebanon, which is a nation fundamental for us, on which Italy has an extraordinary history of work and frontline commitment. You know that today there is a parallel negotiation. The Lebanese president has shown willingness for a direct negotiation with Israel, showing an extreme proof of courage, and I think that this too is an area in which Italy can play an important role. One of the issues that I intend to discuss with Emmanuel Macron in the G2G, in the intergovernmental summit that we have on Thursday, because I think it is one of those things in which Italy and France can work together. So, I will explain it to you today as a comment on Starmer's resignation. And since the British Prime Minister has resigned in 3 years, you know, I will now see the third British Prime Minister I have known. Nigel Farage, who as you know is a prominent figure in British politics, commenting on this, said we have become the Italy of a few years ago, meaning we have a Prime Minister who changes every year. Unfortunately, it is the truth. Now, I always get angry when others talk about us not in the way they should, in my opinion, as a negative example, but it's the truth. Today we are seen as an anchor of stability in an unstable Europe. Yesterday we were the unstable Italy in a generally stable Europe.